Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. I want to share a recent dream that I had that I believe reveals coming food inflation and the impact that it'll have on our daily spending. In the dream, it was nighttime, and my family and I were in the drive thru at Bojangles. When we pulled up to pay, I told the cashier to use my card to also pay for the pickup truck's order beside us. She swiped my card and gave me the receipt. The total was either $240 or $250. Either way, my husband and I were shocked. My husband told me to have the cashier refund us for the truck's order. The cashier was getting off work, but I had her undo the swipe and provide me an itemized receipt. When I received the receipt, I saw my family's order was $68 and the truck's order was $88. I looked at the entire receipt, but I couldn't see what was causing the total to be that $240, $250. So I just told the employee that, hey, I'm used to a family meal costing us $30. So that's the essence of the dream. I believe this dream reveals the impact of the coming food inflation and how it may affect not only our daily spending, but our ability to give and be a blessing to others. In real life, when I go to Bojangles, I sometimes pay for the person's order behind me as a way to be a blessing and practice being a giver. I feel like it's a great way to make someone's day by buying their meal. But in the dream, the food costs were so high, it stifled our ability to really give to someone else. And so I believe God is revealing that if we don't prepare for this coming inflation, it will be a challenging time for us and impact our ability to give. I personally believe that in the dream, the pickup truck doesn't represent necessarily just one person, but it could represent like being able to give to Christian ministries and give to other families. So, a couple of things I want to point out from the dream. Number one is the chicken. These high prices were centered around a basic food item being chicken, and some might say biscuits because Bojangles are also known for their biscuits, but that's mainly flour and water, right? So it's not like it's an expensive ingredient. Chicken is only worth so much. So if chicken prices are high, it has to be something driving up the cost. And typically, it's one of three things: availability, labor, or feed costs, with the feed being a blend of grains, corn, and soybeans. The last thing I want to point out is that although the food costs were high, it still didn't explain the overall total that I was charged. My family's meal was $68 and the truck's was $88, but there was still almost a $100 additional charge that was taken out. I will say that after I had this dream and prayed for the interpretation, I went on YouTube and the first video in my feed was actually this short from Marcus.
Let's talk about hedging against food inflation because we know it's coming. Not only have people in this community prophesied famine, but the Bible, Revelation 6:6 tells us it's coming. Bread is going to cost a day's wage. Investing in agricultural commodities, buying futures or shares in agricultural products like wheat, corn, soybeans, which may increase in value as food prices rise. Investing in farmland, purchasing farmland as an asset that can appreciate in value and generate income through agricultural production. Storing non-perishable foods. Canning your own food, storing foods, preparing, stockpiling non-perishable food items when prices are lower to avoid higher costs in the future. And lastly, investing in companies, buying shares in companies involved in food production, distribution, or retail that can pass increased costs onto customers, thus maintaining their profitability.
As you heard from the video, he talks about how to hedge against coming food inflation by investing in specific ag based commodities. What's interesting is that in the longer video, this info is centered around a dream he had regarding a blue hen. I wonder if there's a connection between the chickens in our dreams. The same day I had this dream, once I arrived at work, HR informed me that they were doing some system changes and that I needed to go in and reset my investment portfolio. And I believe that that was just further confirmation from God highlighting the need to add agricultural based investments to my portfolio. One thing I want to add is that I actually receive commodities market reports. If you want to look at the charts themselves, you can go to, I think it's called barchart.com. But I want to highlight a couple of them, the wheat and eggs. And I received this market report on November 15th, so it's pretty recent. So for the wheat, the bullish market indicators, it talks about the Russian-Ukraine conflict and that how that's causing great uncertainty about agriculture export status. Russian crop expectations are lowered, but their exports are still cheap. And then it says that European wheat production is at a 12-year low. Now, for the bearish market indicators, it highlights that there are very large corn and soybean crops. The new crop winter wheat is getting good moisture after a dry start, and U.S. exports have been lagging expectations, and the U.S. dollar continues to be strong. Now, for eggs, it says that over the last month, 5 to 6 million hens were lost to the avian flu in, looks like, 5 Western states. Most of the new outbreaks were spread from dairy cows, which is interesting. These losses, combined with holiday demand, have significantly driven up shell egg prices to over $4.50 a dozen. But it says that even with flu losses, the hen population did increase over the last 30 days, and egg prices should remain very high through the holidays, and we may see some modest declines early next year. So I'm going to continue to monitor these market reports, and I'll report out if I see anything significant or anything substantial. Lastly, before I end the video, I want to say that I came across 2 other video clips that I want to add to the end of this one. I believe they may give insight into what will drive up our prices and could maybe explain why the cost of the fast food in my dream came out to $250, which is still crazy. I do want to add that sometimes when I have dreams, God will make things extreme just so I can get the point that he's trying to convey. So this doesn't necessarily mean that fast food prices, it's going to cost $250 when you go buy food. It could just mean that, hey, things are going to increase. Take note.
The Great Melt-Up phase will be divided into 2 eras. So the first era will be the Great Melt-Up pre-crisis, and the second era will be the Great Melt-Up post-crisis. Now, during this pre-crisis era, which is what we're in right now, we will see inflation reaccelerate. So this pre-crisis era will end when the government and Federal Reserve manufacture a crisis to cut interest rates to 0 and print a tremendous amount of money. So the crisis will usher in the second era of the Great Melt-Up, and we will see explosive inflation. Now, the second era of the Great Melt-Up will end when other countries and institutions lose faith in the dollar system. So this will leave the US government and Federal Reserve no choice but to attempt austerity and deflation, which will trigger an economic collapse. So when the collapse becomes unbearable, the government and central bankers will have no choice but to enter a new era of US hyperinflation. So of course, hyperinflation will bring the demise of the dollar system, and then we will enter the next stage, the Great Reboot. It will be the birth of a new financial system and a political revolution. Inflation will reaccelerate. It will be vicious, and I want you to be prepared. And not just for you, but for your family, for your dependents, for the people that you care about. It is our responsibility, so yours and mine, to defend the people that you care about, because the government will not provide sufficient assistance when there's an economic collapse. So here's what will happen. This is inevitable. As inflation accelerates, the price of almost everything will go up. Groceries, healthcare, insurance, property taxes, tuition, vehicles, daycare, just about everything. So inflation will increase your expenses, no doubts, right? But inflation will also increase the value of assets. You must protect yourself from inflation by buying appreciating assets. I would prioritize owning a home and stocks. Other assets that you can consider would be gold, silver, Bitcoin. Now, what I told you is a straightforward concept. However, I must state that explicitly because there will be many people with the mentality that the price of homes, stocks, Bitcoin, gold, silver, they're so high, I'll just wait in cash and hope for a crash. So that is logical thinking when the government and Federal Reserve do not interfere with the markets. However, the politicians and central bankers have hijacked the markets since the great financial crisis of 2008. So the financial system and the markets are now completely rigged. Inflation will accelerate, and asset prices will continue exploding to new record highs. So we are in the great melt-up, and you are witnessing this with your own eyes. Asset prices, they're not going to go up in a straight line. There will be bumps along the way, but they'll just keep going higher.
So what is our current financial system? Our current financial system is based off of a decades-old agreement between the United States of America and Saudi Arabia. In this agreement, the United States got Saudi Arabia to agree to only sell oil in US dollars. Now, why is this important? This does not just affect Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is the leader of OPEC. OPEC consists of 23 different oil-producing countries. The largest Middle Eastern countries that produce oil are in OPEC. With Saudi Arabia leading all of these Middle Eastern countries that sell oil, they make the call what they can sell their oil in. So whenever the United States made the deal with Saudi Arabia to sell oil in dollars, it wasn't just a deal between the US and Saudi Arabia, it was a deal between the United States and all of the Middle Eastern oil-producing countries. Now, everyone's heard of supply and demand, and this is what has caused the demand for the US dollar to be so high. And this is what has caused our value of our dollar to be high. So that's our current financial system. Well, Saudi Arabia has openly announced now that they are planning on changing that system as early as this year, 2023. Saudi Arabia has openly announced its consideration for joining BRICS. BRICS is an economic grouping of 5 countries for now. It's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. There are many countries that are planning on joining BRICS and have already put in their applications to join them this year. But Saudi Arabia is the linchpin to our US dollar and the current financial system. So we're going to hyper-focus on Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia joining BRICS would mean that they are getting out of agreement with our current financial system and will not use the US dollar in trade with other countries for selling oil. But not only Saudi Arabia, that would mean all of the 23 OPEC countries would no longer sell their oil either in US dollars. This would, of course, lessen the need and demand for the US dollar, causing crippling inflation almost instantly.